Yeah, good to go now.
We Santo Man Kolnyang Mike Cholgrangawan Yubit Luping Yarul Pandini Shet Maniel Aneketon Niel Jilo Wenetona Dol. I think a kick a book a god by Anyalian dear Kuik a thing. Gemanalia, when I jang along, I jedu Kagaparandi. Madina Maja, Kubo, the Makur Kagabolican, who I that young Wagaridin, Kagala, Emmanuel, when you go to the year. I think a kick a book a god by Anyalian dear Kuik a thing. Gemanalia, when I jang along, I jedu Kagaparandi. Madina Maja, Kubo, the Makur Kagabolican, who I that young Wagaridin, Kagala, Emmanuel, when a man you go to the year. I think a kick a book a god by Anyalian dear Kuik a thing.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are tuning in. Welcome to Lake State Media Beyond Boundaries. In the studio with us is Mr. Edmund Yakani, CEO of SHEPO, and also Secretary General, Mr. Majok Makur. Majok, take the floor and welcome our guests. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, the president of Lake State Media, Isaac Tiang Paul, for always creating time and sacrifice everything that you are supposed to do because of South Sudan affairs. Thank you for that. And to our viewers, as you have already been welcomed by our president of Lake State Media, basically today we'll be having a conversation. And this conversation will basically focus on the speech of the president delivered today in Juba in the parliament during the opening of the Legislative Assembly. Today, for our parliamentarians to resume their duties accordingly as they went for a break since last month or last year, December. So in that speech is a lengthy speech of about 17 pages. And there are numerous things the president touched upon, of which Mr. Edmond Yakani, which is our usual guest, prominent activist in our country, always comes to Lagos State Media to give us clarity of what the real issues in our country really means to the people of South Sudan, and to also remind us that we have a role to play in that country, despite being in diaspora or within the country. You have a role as the citizens of the country to play in order to realize peaceful and prosperous South Sudan. Up to that juncture, our viewers, kindly I'm reminding you on a high respect note to share this live show on your platform so that many South Sudanese will get to know what our conversation of today is all about. Thank you so much for joining us, those who have already joined. We really appreciate that. And we are here to dissect, analyze, and to look into the speech of the president and see the weight this speech really carried and how this speech will give energy to parliamentarians and to the citizens of the country as we are looking forward for the elections next year up to 2025. Mr. Edmund Yakani, thank you so much for always creating time to come to Lagos State Media and speak to your countrymen and women. That is absolute role of which every South Sudanese could give that appreciation to you in person. and to the SEPO, which is doing great things in our communities, especially to deal with the issues of communal violence in across the pastoralist communities in our country of 3 regions. Thank you so much. The floor is yours. Give us your opening remark, Mr. Edmund Yakani, before we dive into our conversation of today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thanks to Lex Media for hosting me for this particular session, which is a session that much more focused on the speech of the president during the inauguration of the parliament after their recess, the first recess they held. And I think it was a speech that somehow you can say it's a sound speech. It's a sound speech. It's a speech that speaks to issues that people wish the president to address. And even the language of the speech is a bit language that is open and straightforward without so much language of blames, but it's much more loaded with language of taking responsibility. So I think that's what I can say. And thanks to the listeners of Lex, and we will continue the conversation. As you said, it's a conversation. Let's try to see what does the speech contain and how do you take up the speech. And of course, remember, this speech will be deliberated on tomorrow by the parliament to become a government working policy. So normally speech of the president, such like that, have to be deliberated by the parliament. The parliament adopt it as a national working policy for this season of the parliament session until the break for next recess. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Edmund Yakani, for your opening remark. As we move into the conversation, and also for you to unpack the speech of the president, Mr. Edmund, we really need you to give us what does this speech contain, and what does this inauguration of the parliaments mean to the parliamentarians themselves in both houses, the upper house and the lower house, and what does it mean to the parties to the agreement, and what does it mean to the international communities, especially the partners, and what does it mean to the citizens of our country. For the first time, if my memory serves me well, for the president to do exactly official inauguration of the parliaments and seeing the speaker in lawmakers' attires trying to hand over the power, the instrument of power, to the president. It was something unique, and it sends a clear message to our regions and to others who may follow the political landscape in the country. Currently, Mr. Edmund Yakani, you are always following each and every details of what is happening in our nation, especially on political affairs up to date. Can you unpack and give us your thoughts and wisdom in regard to this speech of the president? Thank you, Edmund Yakani.
Thank you very much. I would like to say first, this speech is delivered in an atmosphere that also have a regional presence. You know, South Sudan is hosting what we call the Great Lakes International Conference starting from tomorrow. So already we have the speakers of other Great Lakes member states in the country or delegates on behalf of the speakers of the Great Lakes members of the country, and including even chief whips and including clerks of Great Lakes country. So the speaker of DRC Congo is in the middle of this event, and some speakers of other countries, deputy speakers of other countries of the Great Lakes, they are in. So that's, and good enough that it was not as shameful as at least the speech of the president, even in terms of content of language and flow of ideas, is convincing because when a speaker did her welcoming opening remarks in the parliament and when she welcomed the speakers of other countries, we're a bit worried whether the speech is going to be like the usual speech. But at least this speech, somehow it have given a weight and have given a sense of a speech of a president, which I like it actually. I commend those who draft this particular speech, is that they're improving on the speech of our president, because normally the speech is either full of loaded terminologies and loaded language of blames. At least this is a speech where you see the language is towards taking responsibility. Taking responsibility. It's no longer blame. Like, we are at fixed. We must act as the leaders. That's a summary of the content of the language of the speech of the president. As I said, as usual, it's the longest speech, 17 pages. But I will describe it as, before I unpack, I describe it as a speech of 10 working points. It's composed of 10 working points that are more practical to the speech. So it's first time a speech that I was able to single out working points. Other speeches normally is either long speeches without practical working points. What are these working points? So these working points are what I'm going to unpack. The speech of the president. Number one, which is a key message as a working point to the political leaders of the country, no more extension of the transitional period. You read message, it created a bit of a cold weather for some MPs who may question themselves towards elections. No more extension. Then the table I'm sitting around, it was a table composed of young MPs from different political parties, and I went to sit in terms of that table. And the response was, hey, what about if the condition is not conducive for environment? What is next? So you can see people are start raising questions like, if the condition is conducive for environment, what's next if no extension? So that's number one message. The second message, which is following that, is elections must be conducted. It's a must that we must conduct election by December 2024 without any excuse. And based on this particular one, he directed the outstanding committee that is tasked to implement the revitalized peace agreement, or the roadmap in particular, to ensure that urgently they finish out the process for the reconstitution of the Political Parties Council, the National Election Commission, the National Constitutional Review Commission, and the Constitutional Drafting Committee. So directives were given that those who are in charge of making sure parties nominate their nominees for the reconstruction of this institution make it quickly, which is a good message that we wish for all. We have been chatting for almost 1 year around this. The third one is speaks to the pockets of the citizens. He directed Minister of Finance to ensure that a national economic conference have to be held at a moment where $100 is almost rating to 90 to 100 plus SSP 1,000. So $100 is really a very expensive one. So it speaks to the economy that it will challenge people. The fourth one is what you call the dancing point of the MPs. When President declared, it's really a dancing point, because I remember the music band read the music and I can see MPs dancing like people who have celebrated a successful transition from violence to peace. What is this number 4 working point that made the MPs to dance? Is the directive to the Minister of Finance to ensure constituency development funds have to be released. The MPs really dance on this. And I can see people singing songs and dancing when the music was dancing. So CDF now is on function, part of the Director of the President to the Minister of Finance. And I feel like the MPs are saying, oh, at least we're going to go for elections and CDF is coming. So a chance of campaigning is on the table. So that's message number 4, that the president has spoke to it. Message number 5, which is also a directives, he directed the Minister of Finance to ensure that the country conduct what we call environmental social audits. And this is related to issues of environmental impacts in the country and related to especially oil fields. So he spoke to that as a message, which is number 5 that he have communicated to the citizens. Message number 6 is that the security arrangement must be implemented. And this time rolling out the training for Batch 2, which is a bit late anyway, but they have communicated that the opposition have to come with guns, no more sticks. So the excuse of that we're coming with sticks is enough. So they're going to go for the second cantonment without guns is not accepted. They have to come with their guns so that they're trained with their guns and they graduate with their guns. Message number 7, this president spoke to transitional justice, and in particular directed the Minister of Justice to ensure the process for drafting the legislation on formation of the Commission for Truth, Healing and Reconciliation, and then the legislation on Compensatory Reparation Authority is speed up, because peace and reconciliation is required. Message number 8 is that the communal violence is disturbing, and he wishes that the communal violence should be addressed and should be mitigated immediately, because it affects the country, and that also have implications if they conduct elections. Message number 9, which is a message That sounds, I was asking myself, where is it? It is the Minister of Foreign Affairs must achieve our foreign policy objectives. Then I asked someone, where is our foreign policy? Have you seen our foreign policy? They say, my friend, President have directed. So it is inclusive of Minister of Foreign Affairs to make sure that there's a foreign policy, because how do we evaluate the directives to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to achieve our foreign policy objective? And foreign policy objectives are defined by President, for example, lobbying the foreign countries to support the implementation of the Revitalize Agreement, lobbying some of the bodies for lifting of the sanctions and the arms embargo, working with the AU to make sure that our borders with our neighboring countries, boundary disputes are resolved, borders issues are resolved. So those are some of what is called objective of foreign policy that President have defined. But of course, the question is, why is the foreign policy that we can get those objectives from? Message, the last, is that in line with the commitment to the spirit of Pope Francis' visit to South Sudan, he tried to work out as a president with his government to ensure that they pursue negotiation through the Rome peace process. And of course, remember, this is coming after when the attempt for Rome peace process in this round failed on agreeing on an agenda. So he says still they'll work out with the holdout groups, the non-signatories group, that they will continue using the table of mediation under St. Gideon in Rome. And he said, unfortunately, here he gave a precondition. The precondition that if he's going to Rome, he does not want to start a new agenda. They should start where previously they've left. So that means somehow send a signal, I'm not interested on the proposal of the National Round Table. And of course, this means he's still sticking the point of a disagreement that led this last round of the Rome peace talks couldn't proceed. So those are what we call 10 working points from the speech of the president. And of course, in those 10 working points, 3 are strongly directives. Actually, 4. 4 are strongly directives. That more than 3 directives to the Minister of Finance to release money for CDF. And I'll tell you, when you see the MPs, when they hear the CDF now have to be released, the way how the MPs stand up and dance in the room. Then I was asking one of my colleagues, is this CDF real to mean its purpose? Or is this CDF is going to be pocketed for electoral campaign? That's why they're happy. They say, CDF and election is coming. That's a very good one. And I'm quite sure that Parliament is going to be hard on the CDF. So you see everybody's face open up and they're smiling. And even I remember most of them start shouting, Salva Kiir, oh yeah. So I say, okay, when CDF now, that's a good one. And also around the issue of arrears and civil servants, remember, because the directives to the Minister of Finance was inclusive of civil servant salaries that the President have directed. So I think these are the 10 working points. My opinion is some of these directives are critical directives, specifically around the elections, around the CDF, around the economic conference, but whether the executive will respond. Because one of the challenges always to the speech of the president is that executive does not take the speech of the president as a directive, policy directives for them to execute. A normal such speech will come. I remember this speech is more or less close to a speech after when the president reversed the return of the country to 10 states. He made a similar speech like this one with action point bullets, but unfortunately the executive have not respected. I will tell you one of them is what? One of them is Kampala Convention. He directed the government, the relevant ministries to ensure the Kampala Convention is ratified and signed for the best interest of the internal displaced persons. And even he repeated this during the 16 May celebration in public in that same year, which is in 2016. But unfortunately, up to now, it's not been executed. So the next question is, will the executives that are relevant concern, directives here, will they execute the direction of the president? And who are these, for example? 1, there's more than 3 tasks that were directed to the outstanding committee for the implementing the roadmap. What are these directives? The conduct of the elections, the reconstitution of the relevant institutions, this is to them, and then the security arrangement in terms of rolling out phase 2 of the unified forces. And of course, remember, we are still working on unification of the second command hierarchy, and we have not redeployed the first graduation. The directives to the Minister of Finance on CDF holding national conference. Of course, national conference will happen, but the CDF is a big challenge. That's the biggest, and that's the Minister of Finance to release money for environmental social audits. Those are directives that goes to the Ministry of Finance, which is completely. And of course, the intercommunal violence is much more linked with the Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Peace Building, and also the release of funds to mitigate this. transitional justice is a means of justice, which I think the means of justice is more one of the soft ground that the means of justice can come out quickly with legislation, because I've been interacting with the ministry for quite a number of days. I know there's a committee which is working on drafting the legislation, and now the legislation will be subject for public hearings and taken to the parliament to be endorsed. So this 10 working point speech will drive the country from now until towards the end of the first 12 months of the pre-transitional period, which was extended by the roadmap. So let us see, when the parliament is going to close for the next recess, what percent of this 10% action point, or this 10 action point were delivered. So we will assess ourselves. So from our side as a civil society, one of the things that I'd like to share with the audience that we immediately pick up some areas of interest for us is that with the CDF, we want to ensure there's a community sensitization manual on the CDF. Because if we don't inform our communities about the CDF, what is it, how does it work, and how can they hold the MPs accountable? Honestly, 550 MPs giving them CDF, it's a quite number of cargoes of the oil will go to their pockets. So we must make sure we properly have a system of how the CDF will go. And I think for me, the call to the academia and to the diaspora, this is a high time we need to start writing up about the CDF. What are our experience in the previous CDF, and how can this be better than that? So I think this is some of the messages that were, and of course, in terms of how much will the speech be realized, it is a commitment of the executive in respecting the speech of the president that they can deliver. And because they're really fixed, the coming rainy season, the implementation of the roadmap is going to be a bit problematic with the infrastructure. So president was saying no way. And I remember he made a joke. He says, I know some of you here in the room does not want to see elections happening because they are not confident whether they will come back or they will not come back. But there's no way out. No more extension. That no more extension is a very strong message that the international community will be closely watching. Even the economic conference, I'm quite sure it's for best interest for World Bank, best interest for IMF. They want to see how much does it go. So the question is, experts will be allowed to deliver what is required in this conference. So I think those are some of the key messages from the speech of the president. Thank you. Over there.
Thank you so much, Edmond Yakani, for unpacking the speech of the president into 10 working points, as you put them. In actual sense, you really tried to break down the speech into things that many South Sudanese really want to hear from the president, and what was the intention of the president to give such a strong message or a speech in the parliament today. Mr. Edmond Yakani, the question is, will this speech be different from the previous speeches which were delivered by the president? And remember, there are many speeches president delivered. But once it comes to the action point or the action part of it, they are always on a slow motion. Do you believe this speech will be different like the way it was delivered from the rest of the speeches delivered before, since 2013 up to now? Thank you very much.
You know, this question you ask, it's really to what level will president himself take responsibility of holding his subordinates accountable on his speech? Because my experience at the previous speech couldn't be delivered. And there are some great speeches which are delivered before this one, by the way. As you said, I have all the speeches of the president. In normal, I collect his speeches in 3 events per year. One event is opening of the parliament. Second event is day like SPLA Day, or what do you call the Matters Day. And then also day like Independence Day, and then close of the year speech. Normally, this is speech every year. I have these 4 speeches. Since 2013, I have a full big files of those speeches. There are some speeches which are more sounds, stronger and practical than this. But the weakness is that, and my follow-up is that normally, when the speech of the president is delivered like this, the next that the parliament will have a deliberation on the speech of the president. And of course, this particular speech of the president is a policy document that is the parliament is going to deliberate it. But normal weakness that come from the parliament is that parliament will never direct a particular executives to take responsibility. And parliament never follow their decisions on how executive can translate the speech of the president. So I think if we don't improve in this area, this speech will not make any difference. Like what I've seen in the past, it will remain like in the past, great speech. People appreciate, people talk about it, people say, okay, at least this speech, I've sent these messages. But unfortunately, if the parliament didn't deliberate it on it seriously and direct the executives and have a proper implementation plan, this is one thing. The second thing is the office of the president. I think the office of the president is an office for drafting speeches only. Following up what the president said in public, the office of the president is weak in that because they are supposed to help the supporting of the president in executing. And you see there's a quite number of civil servants in the office of the president. And so ask yourself, what this big number of civil servants of the president are for? If they cannot liaise with the parliament to ensure endorsement of the speech of the president, if they cannot liaise with cabinet to ensure the cabinet direct a particular ministries to implement, and right now, for me, is that now, if they cannot liaise with the clusters, because one of the shortest cut for the office of the president to ensure that the speech of the president is translated to action is when they can split like these 10 points. You can divide them into clusters. Some of them go to economic cluster, some of them go to governance cluster, some of them go to service cluster, some of them go. And even by the way, president have made one of the points that I don't want to forget here, which I want to add is that it is actually the better scent of the speech of the president. President declaration of commitment for free education at primary and secondary and prioritizing girl child education. But at the same time, president have already released 1 billion SSP to the Ministry of Education because say education is the only pathway. That's the overall message of the president you have to live in the education. Of course, at least the Ministry of Education, I have to be honest with you, Ministry of Education can take speech of the president serious. And that's why you see during the exams, we're able to see teachers swimming with exams on their head. And they don't care whether there's snakes inside the water, whether they'll get bite, but just to make sure that the generation to come sit exams and they take advantage. And I think that's why some teachers need to be appreciated for that. And especially in some parts of the flooded areas. In Unity State, in Upper Nile, in Jongole, I have seen teachers swimming. Imagine a teacher swimming with exams on his head to reach out to population of children, just for them to sit and determine their future. That's really a very big national value. That's part of the biggest side of the speech of the president today. So for me, I will blame if the speech of the president is not translated into an action. I have direct blame to the following. One, I will blame what is called policy directors in the office of the president. Because we see them in a very good neckties, they sit in a very good AC in the palace and they drive good V8s, their pockets are full, but unfortunately, they are below the performance that we require to see them in the office of the president. So that's people that I blame them because they can liaise with the clusters and the head of clusters are vice presidents. They can liaise with the office of the speaker to ensure the office of the speaker work with the specialized committees so the specialized committees follow the ministries. And that's one of the gaps that normally exists in the office of the president. And sometimes when you talk about it like this, you come to read some people feel it bad and they start posting threats. And of course, people like us, we don't care about threats. And they don't know who is living on this earth. You decide to take my life, I'll be waiting for you in the heaven because my case cannot be judged until you come. Then I have to say it before God if you believe you're a Christian. So for me, the office of the president have a bigger responsibility to do that. Secondly, the cabinet affairs. How much will the cabinet affairs translate the speech of the president into a working document for the Council of Ministers to look into it so that each minister will take the docket? So for me, those are some of the division. But also there's another thing that I'll tell you. Some people use the speech of the president as a source of eating. You know, these days in South Sudan, we have created a new terminology for some certain projects. We call them Nya projects. These Nya projects are feeding projects. And some people even may take the speech of the president as a Nya project, as for feeding project. So for me, those are some of the challenges that we need to really take it up is that president normally sets objectives and his subordinates define activities. With the technocrats, they implement these activities. Are we following that channel of analogy that when the president delivers, he delivers the objectives? Then the ministers have to sit down and turn them into activities so the technocrats will go and implement for the best interest of the citizens. And actually, if you're asking me, what should I see as an immediate from tomorrow that should be taken serious is the economic conference. Because one of the biggest things is that we don't lack revenue. We have enough revenue, but we have misdirection of our revenue to wrong priorities. We misdirect our revenue to right priorities. This oil money, if we inject to agriculture, doing to import food from Uganda, and we have pockets of peace in the country. There's some states who are stable. In Western Equatoria, you can do farming. In Awil, you can do farming. There are states you can do farming that can bring food to the market. Look here, Magui, close to Juba here. Magui is a food basket to Juba. We can put enough money to Magui community. They can produce food that actually in Juba, we don't need to buy food from Uganda, or we don't want food to be imported for us from Uganda. So the question is that the economic conference is really a clue. Even if you go for the elections, you need money. The economic conference can determine whether the government have the capability financially to run the elections or not. So for me, the economic conference is the best thing that should be picked up. So as I said, is really people who have the responsibility to translate the speech of the president into an action are now required to take serious measures. Otherwise, it will end up like previous speeches. Thank you. Over there.
Thank you so much, Edmund Yakani, for that. Indeed, you have mentioned the people to blame upon, of which, if the speech of the president failed actually or fell short to meet the required standard or expectation of the citizens, and the expectators actually, many people are believe that the speech of president may change something or might change something in the near future. Mr. Edmund Yakani, you were in the hall when the president was inaugurating the parliament. And you know the house is deeply divided along the political parties to the agreement of which every parliamentarian always pay allegiance to his master, not to the nation. As the activist who has been there with them and walking on the same journey with them, did you see any change through the physical appearance today during the president's speech? Or some of the opposition still believe that this speech was supposed to be delivered by my chairman, not by the chairman of the SPLM as a political party? Do you believe really this speech will bring the House of Representatives together and speak as a nationalist, as the people that can determine the future of South Sudan, as the people who can direct all other arms of the government, the executive, the judiciary, at least to follow what the parliaments agree upon? Or do you still believe that they will continue with their business as they always pull out from the house when there is any bill that needs to be tabled and some group is disadvantaged by the bills? The only language is to call the media and tell them that we are pulled out from the parliaments until this issue is addressed. Kindly, can you give us your wisdom in that regard? Thank you.
I have some few observations. Some are positive, some are negative. One thing that I have seen MPs almost unanimously are happy is a declaration of CDF must resume, because some of them have not tested what is called CDF. Because even once one was close to me shouting at one, that's my CDF they can jai. If the CDF is coming, we those who are newly in the parliament who have never received previously, we should be the first to be awarded. You the old elected MPs, you cannot get them. So they start shouting around me like, look here, you the elected MPs, you don't deserve the CDF because you have received before. We must receive it. So there's a misconception of CDF as like it's a personal money of the MP to decide on how to execute. That particular message have united the parliament. As I told you, and even I don't know how does it connect? Our police band raised a song, and I can see the MPs standing up, jumping. You don't see any political color there because now CDF is additional money to my pocket. Now I'm going to go to my constituency. That have united them. So it means if you to put resources to the parliament, you can quickly win consensus. So because declaration on CDF have raised a consensus. That's one thing that I've said is an observation of consensus that the MPs have. One thing that it has created a bit of tension is a speech of the speaker. When the speaker was delivering her opening speech, some MPs will start making noise. Oh, no, no, no. One, there are allowances of the MPs. They have what you call betterment allowances, health allowances. They'll say, no, 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 no. So, like, they feel disturbed. Second, there's a few individuals, some few MPs from across the parties, by the way. It's not one party, had a problem with the speaker. Those who are beating the drums of impeachment of the speaker. They're saying, look at this, look at the speech. The speech is not concrete. The speech is too scattered. The speech is more of blaming us. And you know, she's opening Pandora box. Even, of course, the speaker threatened some MPs that they want to take issues of internal parliament affairs to social media. They want to publish in social media to condemn them. So some men are not happy with the appointment of a female as a speaker. So some of them are shouting. There's a bit of division between the leadership of the parliament and the parliamentarians. I've seen some few of them who are not happy and across the parties. And I think those are the, if I'm to calculate, those are the architects of impeachment of the female speaker because for corruption. So I said around groups that are mixed of those particular categories. Even some start underlining her speech. You know, like this language is bad, this language is not good, we don't agree, she's lying here, she's opening a Pandora box, she's insulting us here, why, this is a personal problem. So the speech of the speakers, you know, somehow received because some of them are really arguing and pushing back. And of course, those are their personalities in the parliament that they had a problem with the speaker. That's one thing that I have seen in the parliament. One thing which I don't know what happened is I saw SPLM outside in uniform with SPLM in the red colors, and other parties are not there. And I think somehow this should be discipline to the SPLM that parliament is a national house. You don't need to politicize it. Because if other parties start coming, will you give them the space also to wear their uniforms? And do you turn this? I think parliament is a house of political consensus. So this is something that somehow I'm not so much impressed. And even I approached one guy, I said, look here, you as a ruling party, why do you want to behave like other African parties that when it comes to such an event, you want to show dominance? You know, you have a political discipline. This particular event is a national event, regardless of your political colors. Leave it as a national issue of consensus. So somehow there's that bit of observation, which may sound negative to some of the SPLM members. Of course, political discipline is a principle that we have to respect if we want to exercise democracy and good governance. So that is, for me, is a very bad observation that I've seen. That's one thing. The other thing I've seen that also it's a bit challenging. It's a bit, I observe it in the parliament, something that I'm quite sure is going to be hard. It is, there's a merging tension on the parliament. I observed today closely, and I think nobody realized it. Young parliamentarians versus age parliamentarians. During the speech of the president, you can see the difference at age difference, into what we call intergenerational differences. The young parliamentarians were saying, we are going to deliberate on this properly and follow. Then these age politicians will say, how will it be different like previously? My friend, what is wrong with you? You're still new in the parliament. So I can see that argument between the young parliamentarians and the aged parliamentarians. And I think the young parliamentarians, because based on that argument, I took a responsibility to assess the room, both male and female, how many are young. We have a good number of young parliamentarians if they are to stand up for the best interest of the country. And also I assess they're across the parties. So if the young parliamentarians can stand up, and by young, I mean those who are at least from per youth age, 35 below. But because I want to use the word young beyond youth age, from 40 below. Those ones, if they can build caucus of that age in the parliament across party colors, they can somehow shake the parliament. Because even the elections, one of the elders before me was speaking that, you know, we are since 1972, we've been hearing such messages. Then told me, you know, that's an old politics. We're now in new politics, .com politics. He said, this .com of yours, where will it take you? After all, this internet will never work, this .com of yours. So you can see the tension between the young parliamentarians and the aged parliamentarians. And I think somehow, I have a little hope on the young parliamentarians that if we invest on them, they can somehow make a sound move in the parliament. So I think that's another observation that I've seen today in the parliament when the speeches were coming. One thing that I've seen is still problematic in the parliament, and I think is a negative observation, is that still MPs sit in their tables on regional basis, if you're not party. That's something I observe, and I think is a negative for me. For you to see MPs who are all sitting in one table, nowhere across the parties, MPs who are speaking bar language across the parties, they sit as a bar in one table. I think that's, for me, send a very bad signal. That's my observation of the tables. So you can't see table Because inside that you don't see their political colors, but region, state, language define the table. Few tables you can see mixed, and normally the mixed tables are tables of those, I will tell you a bit, well-educated MPs. Their tables somehow are mixed, but we have these middle-class educated MPs. They go on either regional line or ethnic line or state line, and that tells you how
The appointed
challenging.
MPs.
Exactly. They're mobile phone recruited MPs. So that tells you how threat is going to be on the function of the parliament if we want to gain national consensus. And I will tell you what the non-signatories to the agreement were proposing, what do you call the round table. If we are to do the interpretation, the round table is undoing the incumbent government. Those MPs by consensus will say, please forget about this peace process. We must continue eating until elections comes. I'm quite sure some of them are going to take that stand because it sounds to their mind like we need not lose the parliament, because there's a joking when the president say there's no extension, then some of them were joking. If we all find if we're all found with you at the end point with that results, will you continue your presidency? Then one side, no. In the presidency extension, no, extension of everybody, not only one person. So you can see there's already a joke, political joke around the language of no extension. If we fail to deliver, what do we do? Then one of the person was proposed to me that no, we declare state of emergency. Then under state of emergency, we do our extension, no elections. So do some of the messages I'm getting in some of the interaction among the MPs, like how sweet political city is. So of course, the political divides is much more linked with interest. If one's interest is not safe, then they get up. So I hope to see how the parliament is going to pick up this speech and how it's going to perform. But otherwise, just some of the observations that I've seen in the room as I was moving, interacting with some of them, a bit, some of them are negative, as I say, some of them are positive, but the truth has to be told for us to improve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Edmond Yakani, for actually giving us your observation, and especially our viewers to know that 650 MPs in the lower house unanimously agree on one thing, and that is CDF. If they agree on that, then it sends a clear message to the old citizens and to even the informed politicians on that regard. But we'll leave it that way and see how they will interact and how they will resume this session with more energy and try to revolutionize the parliaments and also hold accountable some of the executive, because the parliaments, if the parliament is not active, then the whole nation will be doomed. Because parliament should be a torch that should light during the darkness, and people should follow. But our parliament is becoming a follower, which is very unfortunate to many South Sudanese and to the region. But we are moving slowly. Today, event at least had shown some sense of moving. At least we are taking some few steps. You mentioned one of the points before, Mr. Edmond Yakani, before we go to the comment sections and the clubhouse, that the people that should be blamed are the executives. And executives don't take the speech of the president seriously, and they don't even act upon the directives being given to them by the president. Not to this speech, but to numerous speeches that were delivered before by the president of the republic. But the question is, Edmund, what is wrong with the executive? Is it lack of supervision, or lack of commitment, or lack of accountability, or they are taking advantage of the absence of rule of law? Kindly, can you tell us something about that? Thereafter, I will invite my president, Isaac Temple, to come in and give us some of the questions from our viewers at the comment section, and also the active South Sudanese of Clubhouse, also to voice their opinions in regard to the speech of the president. Thank you so much, Edmund.
One of the biggest thing with the Council of Ministers, I've been closely watching at them. As I told you, like for the since 2013, I've been following speeches of the president and checking the Council of Ministers or the executive's commitment. One thing that I know is that the executives operate in a cells or in a form of cliques. And that has weakened the purpose of why we have something called Council of Ministers. Because once Council of Ministers is divided into cliques, ministers divided into cliques, and those cliques start undermining unanimous decisions. So if you want to attack one of the clique, the rest of the clique will gang up. And I think that have weakened the purpose of why we have Council of Ministers. This is one thing that it happened. Secondly, the top leadership is not so tight on the executives in terms of the ministers. Some of these ministers are so really free. Even some of them can send you a signal that they can undermine the authority of the president because they feel like they're free, they're not held accountable, nobody pushes them back from the presidency. And another thing that have made the Council of Ministers to become a council of a usual business, the recycling of the individuals. Because some of these people have never missed the council forever. They just go for a break, recess of 2-3 years, they're back. Recess of 4 years, they're back. So recycling the same individuals have undermined the purpose of the Council of Ministers. And that's what made some of them feel that even if I'm chased away today, it's just a matter of break of 2-3 years, I'll come back. And I think that's somehow undermine the function of the Council of Ministers with respect to directives that comes from presidency. That's another bigger issue that comes. Thirdly, the Council of Ministers is free from the parliament. The parliament find it very hard to summon them or to impeach them or to discipline them. Some of the ministers undermine the council of the parliament. They look at it. What is it after all? What is the parliament? And partly also why some of the executives are well informed, well educated, well equipped with knowledge more than the parliamentarians. So when they go very harsh. And I realized something also I would like to bring to attention. I realized today. I come to realize some of the executives are actually the nominees of the appointees of the appointment of the MPs. So some ministers have played a big role in nominating some MPs or some individual to be appointed as MPs. So those individuals fear those ministers. And they protect those ministers. If you want to impeach Minister X, a group of MPs will stand up that no. This motion of impeachment should not continue. Simply why? Because that is a minister that have nominated them and send their name to the party chair, and the party chair have nominated as appointed MPs. So there's some ministers that have a power in controlling the MPs. So now when you look at the level of the cliques, so if I'm part of the clique and one of the clique want to be attached, I will go and mobilize my MPs that belong to the clique that we belong to. We'll tell them one of my clique member is under attack. Please, can you also join his group to undermine the concept of the impeachment? So that is a bit of undermining. But I think also one thing that I like really to draw is that the office of the president is not serious, especially the policy directors are not serious in providing the president with information on how to hold the Minister of Cabinet Affairs responsible in driving the cabinet. Because those directors and also the president, they're supposed to provide technical knowledge to the president to hold the Council of Ministers accountable through the cabinet minister. That's why it's called a senior minister. He is supposed to communicate with the presidency, and he is supposed to make sure that everything of the president is taken to the Council of Ministers as an action point. So for me, those are some of the things that I like to bring in terms of why the Council of Ministers cannot implement the speeches of the president. For quite long, as I said, I've been having numerous speeches of the president in a bulky. Some of them are even beyond 17 pages, containing very rich information, but unfortunately, they're not implemented. Why? With this reason that I've shared with you as South Sudanese, as listeners, as people who are listening, that until we improve or until we instill discipline, because one of the mechanisms in the country operates with that discipline, the Council of Ministers, until we instill a discipline council. And that's why I'm telling you that, yes, some of you may argue an opinion, but I have my own opinion. My opinion after one of the ministers that I realized in the cabinet that will take the speech of president serious is the Minister of General Education. Honorable Aoud takes it serious. Look at the way how when President only mentioned in one language that we propose free education, she took it up, she turned it to the ministry, she took until President declared now free primary and secondary education. And it's one of the ministries that still is enjoying foreign aid. British funding is coming for the girl child education, what do you call GES? It's a complete foreign aid and developmental project. That's the only ministry that has maintained that money all throughout this crisis. The rest of the ministries have lost, but it have never lost. So for me, it's a question of discipline from the ministers towards the directives that were given to them by the president. And the weakness is that either the cabinet is not strong enough in pushing that, or the office of the president, directors of the president, are not seriously in remind the president how to hold the council of ministers through the cabinet minister. Or also in the parliament, the chairperson of the outstanding committees doesn't see their role. They miss it because they suppose, and remember, we have a parliament that is operating counter to ministries. You come to realize that there's a committee for a particular ministry in the parliament, and that committee have a chairperson. That chairperson is supposed to be one of the pressing point to the minister through his committee members. But unfortunately, that particular analogy, that particular theory, that particular rationale is not in function. And that's why always speech to the president ending up as like any other speech on air, and then it dies with analysis like the way we are doing it now. Tomorrow another speech come, you start from under square one, as if you are not building the speech to the president on commitment that you have declared before. And that's what I like to say. And even today, the president challenged them. The president told them, I am not going to mention my policy direction because I've told you before. So it means he's trying to remind them, please take up responsibility of translating this speech into an action. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Edmond Yakani, for giving us your thoughts in regard to the different questions posed before you. On that note, I will yield it back to my chairman, Isaac Tiangpol, to give in his remarks. And thereafter, I will yield it back to you, Mr. Edmond Yakani, to give us your last parting shot and closing remark at the same time. And as I'm rightly informed that there are no questions under the comment sections and also on Clubhouse. So we will come to the end of our show or the end of our discussions. And as I will yield it back to the president, I will give you this request, Mr. Edmond Yakani, if you could help us to identify 3 MPs.
I got one more question. One question here. One person has dropped in currently.
All right. If you can identify 3 young MPs within the parliament from different parties within the course of this week, so that we can host them and see their opinions in regard to the president's speech and how they have received the speech of the president. We'll really appreciate that. And I yield it back to my chairman, Isaac Temple. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Majok Makur and Edmond Yakani. I have just, it came in now, one question from Maktiangarang Piok. Is asking, any foreign aid is a huge debt to the people of South Sudan and nothing free in this world yet. I think it's a like recommendation or a comment, and I got one more recommendation as well from Daniel Deng. Just lying with your first remark, it says that what weakened the parliaments is the double roles taken by the parliamentarians, where some are MPs and holds executive positions. President Kiir should change this kind of weak ideology. These are the 2 things. You can just elaborate more on that.
Yeah, if I can start with the Daniel comment of where one person play a dual role, being an MP and being a minister, I think we need to sanction this through constitution. In our next constitution making process, we may need to really control this play, because this play, it undermines the independency of the organs of the government from one another. Because if one is an MP, one is at the same time a minister, and some of them ending up as a spies actually. You come to realize they start spying for the executive when they are playing their MP role, and some of them spying for the MPs when they're playing their executive role. So I think that role to be controlled by the constitution. And I think this is one of the things that we have. We can, as I've mentioned before, that have weakened why we couldn't get that. That's one thing I'd like to say very clear. Of course, for the first one, if we are going for foreign aid as a borrowing, it's a burden. But there's a foreign aid as assistance. So the guest is an assistance. It's just like a government have decided to contribute, like what we have seen recently, when US withdraw from funding the mechanism for the implementation of peace agreement like RGMEC and Citizen, US withdraw their support. Japan came in with 1.7 million US dollars. Japan is now funding CITISAM and RGMEC. And of course, there's a call that somebody like me have been saying, by the way, my brothers and sisters, CITISAM is really discriminative. Our national monitors that come from the parties are not receiving equal money as the international monitors. Of course, the weakness of the agreement say national monitors have to be paid by the government, but international monitors can be paid by the assistant that come like, while actually the people who generate the reports are the national monitors, people who have the consent of whether there's a violation or violation in CITISAM report are the national monitors, but they are less paid and sometimes go 6 months to pay, while those who sum up what the national bring, they're well paid off. Of course, that's a burden of when you have a crisis in your home and you're not organized, you entertain such things. So I don't think that I'm thinking about foreign aid as a borrowing. I'm speaking of foreign aid as assistance for girl child education in the country by the British government, which I say up to now is one of the things that's moving. And that's why President have told today in his speech, if you follow it very clear, you have direct ministers, that in some states, in some communities where the NGOs are withdrawing, he want the ministers to have extra program that they cover up the gap created by the withdrawal of the NGOs or UN agencies or national NGOs in terms of service delivery. So President today have reflect that to the MPs. And of course, this comes to financial budget discipline. How much are we disciplined to our national budget? If we don't have any financial discipline towards national budget, it will never benefit us. If we don't have any financial discipline towards our revenue management, it will not help us. So if we run out with the revenue from the oil, from non-oil revenue, it's not going to help us. We're going to knock doors at borrowing, while some few people will run away with public money. So that's my dive into the two comments. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Edmund Yakani, and thank you, President, for displaying those two comments from our viewers. Actually, they made a valid point in regard to the borrowing and how the debts of the country is increasing every time. And even the things we borrowed sometimes don't even create the impact to the common citizens of the country to know that the debts that their children will pay for the next 50 years is what they have already been served today. And also serving two positions, I think the like of Edmund Yakani will play a great role during the permanent constitutional making in order to make sure we do away with such dealings that you work as a MP and also the minister. So you cannot even hold yourself accountable because it's like you are serving and holding the two plates, and all two plates can serve you adequately in one way or the other. Once you are dismissed here, then you also find refuge in the other hand. Thank you so much for weighing in, Brother Matiang and Daniel Deng, for that. Edmond Yakani, I will give you a chance to give us your closing remark, as we will give our president time also to take a nap because it's already morning hours in Australia and he has to sleep too. Thank you so much.
First, thank you very much for dedicating your time for the national costs of where through this media platform and what we're shaping and we're influencing opinion. My closing remarks is that one, from our side, as civil society, will be closely monitoring the implementation of the speech of the president. As I said, the parliament have to deliberate on it to become a working policy. But one thing, because we have seen so much acceptance and joy and jubilation from the MPs on the CDF, we're not going to treat the CDF simple. We're going to develop communal sensitization manuals, so manuals for our communities to be sensitized. What's the CDF, how the CDF worked, and what are the best practices of the CDF. And we're going to sponsor radio programs that specifically target on the CDF so that some of these MPs will not run away with the CDF, because the previous CDF, some MPs have run away with that money. So we will never allow them to run away again with this money, and they'll never use this money for the election. So we have to open up our eyes. So I think that's my message. My other message is really speaking to the Rome peace process, is that compromises, political maturity, political discipline is needed from the parties that are going to the Rome. I don't blame one single party, but all parties have to really take a responsibility of giving peace and stability chance in terms of driving the country, that I would like to say. But of course, to the incumbent government, lack of delivering the security arrangements, everything can fall apart. Even this election I'm talking about, if you don't deliver security arrangements, still these elections are under question. And of course, for the electoral processes, the timeline is running out. So we don't have enough time to plan. If we want to go for elections, really, we need to really start doing things from now at a double speed. We need to double our energy, to double our efforts, because we have so many casting of votes if we're to go for the elections. And whether we go for the elections once, or we sequence the elections, local government apart, separately from state government separate from the national government, because will the electoral commission have the energy to manage such electoral process? Is something that we do, because right now we don't have electoral commission in place, no political parties, no constitutional making process in terms of constitutional review commission, and constitution is a precondition for the conduct of the elections. So I'd like to say we'll keep on watching. And I think as a civil society, the SPO president also is an advocacy tool that will use it for advocating, for pushing various organs of the government to be accountable, being it the legislative, the executive, or the judiciary, because all of them have responsibility attached to the speech of the president of today. Otherwise, let God bless South Sudan, let God bless Lex Media, and let God bless those who are listening to our conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yakani, for your closing remark and for always giving South Sudanese inside information, and also give them what to think about. Because if you have something to think about, or somebody tells you something to think about, it creates a room for your mind to enlarge itself, and also to things outside to what you tend to believe in. We have a question here from Macan. Why our journalists don't have time to interview the president about their speeches? This will also allow them to find more. Indeed, thank you so much, Mr. Ken, for this question. This is a valid point, and is a genuine question, by the way. It is a question that even some of us are still asking, what is the issue? So, Mr. Edmond, before we close it up, I think you need to give your thoughts, at least briefly, 1 minute, and then I will yield it back to my president to close the show. Thank you so much, Akan.
Actually, today I observed something around this question. When the president closed his speech, he walked away. There was no interview, no press conference about the speech of the president. And our honorable minister of information, Michael McQuay, only spoke to SSBC. iRadio was running to interview him. He didn't pick up with iRadio. So other journalists couldn't pick. So the only journalists that have recorded speech is during the deliverance of the speech of the president and the speakers, but they didn't get chance to do interviews. And then sometimes I'm somebody who's advocating, and I think I do agree with our colleague that, the president, this is something that I've been advocating for quite long, and nobody don't take it. We need to find a day what we call president meeting the press. President to have a time with the journalists, which is specifically, he comes and say, press, here I am. Or if not, let us have somebody who sits as a press of the president that reflects, but the president in person facing the press by itself is a national reconciliation. So I've been advocating for quite long in the parliament, through the information committee, Ministry of Information, also the president, that allow president to have one day what we call president and the press day, where like after he delivers speech, if not today, maybe until Friday, he comes and say, now members of the press, here I am. And especially when they're aiming for elections, we need to cross-examine some of this information to determine the vote power. So I think it's something that I want to use this platform, calling on still, we need to see a day of the president and the press. Because as our colleagues say, they will investigate more, and even they'll get more from the president in terms of interpretation. Because sometimes some of us here, we're attempting to interpret what the president say. He may have his own interpretation. So we have what we call an academic interpretation of what the president intends to do. We relate to the context, we relate to the environment, but my president have his own interpretation of what he meant. So for me, really doesn't need to have the president and the press session. And the challenge is that our leaders in country, they fear the domestic press. They don't speak to our national press. But when they find themselves with the Stephen Saga in hard talk now, they want to temper. Well, you need to have an orientation. Home press give an orientation on how to handle press. But if you don't have home orientation, you find yourself with Stephen Saga on hard talk, or by then, if you're supposed to have Larry King in CNN, you find yourself at that particular moment, or you go to Al Jazeera Insights, so you start murmuring and start battling because you have not handled the domestic remedies of the press around so that to inform you. So I think I agree with our colleague. Honestly, president need to have a day with the press, or even president and the citizen. Or president go to the radio studio and ask citizens, question me. Like there's a program in Rwanda called Ask Your President for an Answer, or Ask Your President for Clarity. You can have that thing for president, maybe once in a month. He can go and sit with the children, ask me as a children, what do you want from me? He can go to medical doctors. He can go to, that will build a connection between what the president is thinking and what the citizen want the president to deliver. Thank you very much. And then finally, I'd like to tell you this. When you're asking about the 3 MPs, I'll spot it for you 3 MPs. We're going to get 3 MPs. One is SOA, one is IO, one is IG. And one of them is a CDF chair. You know, the CDF chair this time is a young youth who is a chairperson of the CDF committee. So we're going to get him. He's from SOA. He's neither IO, neither IG. So we need to bring him and let him tell us, as a young MP, as a chairperson of CDF committee, people jubilate on CDF, how he's going to manage, how he's going to fight corruption of the previous. And I'm really ready to share some data about malpractices around the former CDF, how he's going to control this with Stephen Wondo. So I think, yeah, I saw some other question around the CDF. CDF has been misused by national MPs for Eastern and Jongole, 11 counties, Pibor and Fachala. 90% of the CDF was been misused by our MPs. Now the question is there proper monitoring of these funds in terms of JUBA? So should I respond to this?
Yes, you can just respond to it briefly. Thank you.
You know, this question, the CDF, it's a right question. Personally, I was involved in evaluating the previous CDFs. And there's a 3 level of mismanagement or malpractice on the CDF. And I think these 3 levels we're going to include in our community sensitization manual. First, my assessment that CDF in Equatoria somehow are much more implemented compared to the region of Upper Nile and Bahar Ghazal. I have to be honest with you. And why CDF in Equatoria has been implemented? Because people were quickly educated, communities, on what the CDF is. And one thing that helped us to really manage CDF better in Equatorial region compared to Upper Nile and Baragazal is that in Equatorial region, county commissioners are champions of driving the message around the CDF. In Upper Nile, county commissioners were very far from the CDF. In Baragazal, county commissioners are very far. So it's something that we want to bring in the manual and use what you call experience, best experience. And by the way, also in Equatorial, it's not that only clean. I will tell you the level of corruption in the CDF in the Equatorial region. So corruption has 3 levels. One level of corruption, the release of the money from the Ministry of Finance to the CDF committee. Some members of the CDF committee have played around with this money. I've been calling some of the honorables. They're right now, they're elderly, they're chairperson of the CDF. 12 Land Cruisers disappear in the hands of the CDF committee. 12 Land Cruisers, by the way. 5 doors, brand new, bought. They disappear in my audits. So who took it? The members of the CDF committee took it. Now what they decided is that they have a CDF committee, they start creating ad hoc structures for stealing money. So they have what they call CDF committee, the parliament. Now they have the caucus of Equatorial CDF committee. They have caucus of Baragazal CDF committee. They have caucus of Upper Nile CDF committee. These caucuses ran away with 12 Land Cruisers that were given to them, and they took it for personal use. This first thing. Why should they buy money at the level of National CDF committee while this money are people's money? This is not their money. 2, level of corruption. Now, when the CDF money is supposed to be dispatched, I'm not supposed to be dispatched where the MP say is my money. It's supposed to be community money. So they're supposed to establish what we call CDF committee, where the national MP come together with the state MP and with the county legislatures to establish an account in which commissioner is an accountant, a chief accountant of that account. So this money goes, because this money is going to target the counties that the constituency belongs for. So at that level, there's a money. So for example, I'll give an example. In this level, I have come across cases in Equatoria, MP who receive 1 million will come to an NGO like SEPA with 500,000. And you know, some of us national NGOs were so broke that they can't receive 500,000 at the same time. So an MP comes to you, say, look at SEPA, I have 500,000, go and implement for me a project in my county. So you find an MP coming throwing for you 500,000 on the table, that these are cash money, go and implement. Now you implement this project for 500,000, 2 boreholes, maybe 1, 2 classrooms, schools, you build them there because you feel like now I've received at least government money, I'm implementing project. And some of us also have NYA project inside attached to that CDF money. You go with about, from 500, you go with 50 or you go with 100, that's another stealing of corruption, while MP have kept 500 in his pocket. he will report over that. That's another level of corruption. And the level of corruption is the physical structures in CDF. And this is where it's smart in Equatoria. At least if you go for social audit in Upper Nile, Baragaza region, for CDF money, you find less, like what our colleague have mentioned about Fachala and then Pibor, and even don't go there, even within the jungle, the Bor, go to lakes, go to Awil, there's nothing on the CDF money there. There are few things on the CDF. Yeah, come and see the corruption in where at least you can see physical things in Equatoria. We have been doing some social audits. In Equatoria, this is the level of corruption with CDF. MPs write reports. We have built eight class school, or what do you call a school of 8 classrooms. You go to the ground, you find there are 6 classrooms. They have eaten 2 classrooms in the report. They will tell you have built a classroom where it is 8 by 5 meters. When you go physical, you come to realize it is 6 by 3 meters. So some meters have been eaten. They will tell you have built a classrooms with 16 windows. When you go to the ground, you find it's only 8 windows. So 8 windows money were 8. Physical is 8, but the report is 16. They will tell you we have bought blackboards from Kenya, a quality blackboards, or from Kampala, quality blackboards. You go, you come to realize it is a paint of wall. The wall is painted with a black paint, and they said they have bought blackboards. They will tell you we have bought this expensive ceiling board. When you go, you come to realize it's a very low ceiling board. They will tell you we have bought, for example, 350 chairs for students when they only bought 200. That's the way how they eat. They eat in the region of Equatoria, how corrupt it is. So this CDF requires a citizen's ownership. And one of the things that I really advocate for the CDF is that as a citizens, let's not consider this money is the money of the MPs. This is our money. This is the return of our taxes, by the way. Because this money are not created from anywhere. They are created within our revenue. So it's part of return of our taxes to us as a services through our constituency members. So we need to make sure that CDF is properly tracked and is properly followed. And some of them have bought vehicles. Some of these vehicles have ended up as a personal vehicles of the MPs. And this part of the mismanagement. In Equatorial, it happened also. In Baragaza, it happened. In Upper Nile, it happened that some MPs have owned the vehicles of the MPs, of the CDF. Some of them will come to realize, for example, I will tell you, I've seen in JUBA, Fachala, Pibor, you go to Fiji, you go to place like Koma. See, Constituency Development Fund Land Cruiser is in JUBA. The constituency is very far while the car is running in JUBA for the whole year. This vehicle is for
the network has came in.
Have money in Fachala or in Pibor or in Koma or in Wurul or in Akobo. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edmond Yakani, for your response to the details of CDF and corruption attached to it in different levels, from the Ministry of Finance or Central Bank to the committees, from the committee to subcommittees, from subcommittees to sub NGOs in their particular constituencies. Thank you for that. Yeah, do that for us. Bring them on, 3 of them, and we will have a very good discussion of which you will be part of the panelists, because all of them will be speaking based on their parties. But you will be there to balance the show, and we will look forward to that day. Thank you so much for your time. We always appreciate your commitment and keep it up. Citizens are watching what you are doing. Not only Lagos State media, many people are seeing what you are doing in our country. I will yield it to my president to close our show. And thanks to our viewers for your time, for your questions, and may God be with you. May God bless our country. And let's keep talking until we find a common ground as the citizens of South Sudan. And remember, you have a role to play in that country. Thank you so much. Yield it back to you, President.
Thank you so much, Majok Makur, Secretary General of Lagos State Media Beyond Boundaries. And thank you so much, Mr. Edmund Yakani, CEO of JUBA. And to all our audience, we value your contribution in questionings and sharing your analysis as well and comments in the commentary side. We have to say thank you so much for tuning in this time. We hope we will catch up again. The building of the nation is in our hand, all of us. May God bless Republic of South Sudan. May God bless all of us. May God bless Lagos State Media. Have a good day, good night, good afternoon, wherever you are tuning in. And bye-bye now. Thank you.
We Santo, Man Kolnyang, Mike, Cholgrangawan, Yupit, Luping Yarul Pandiri Chet Maniel, Anaketon Niel, Jilo, Wenetona Dol. I think a kick, Kegabuka, the Bobaye, Anyalia, dear Kuika, Tingrin, Gemanalia, when I jang along, I jedu Kegabarandi, Madina Maja, Kubo, the Makur, Kegabolican, Kuaita Tian, Wagaridin, Kegela, Emmanuel, whenever you go, Lumier, I think a kick, Kegabuka. When I jang along, I jedu Kegabarandi, Madina Maja, Kubo, the Makur, Kegabolican, Kuaita Tian, Wagaridin, Kegela, Emmanuel, whenever you go, I think a kick, Kegabuka, the Bobaye, Anyalia, dear Kubi.